Chris, thanks for being here on Reporter's Notebook. Nice to see you again.
Good to see you, Jay. Always glad to be here, man.
I'm glad you could be, and I know it's more early there, 3 hours earlier there than it is here. So thanks for getting up and starting your day with us on this lovely fall Friday. But Chris, today I want to talk about two things that I know you're working on. One is about Latinos in cannabis and some work you're doing there. The next is something that I think we all saw that you guys wrote about, which is it K.U.S.H Collective getting their California license revoked and what that might mean, certainly for them, but also for the broader industry in California. Does that sound good to you?
Yeah, absolutely. Sounds great.
Well, let's get into the Latinos in cannabis. What is the work you're doing there, and what is it saying so far?
So, we've been working on, this long project to kind of encapsulate, this important demographic in our industry. If you look at certain big cities, Latinos, like in a lot of industries, they're the backbone. When we talk about bud tenders, the front lines in big cities, just like they are, the backbone in a lot of our industries in the United States: hospitality, restaurants, of course, bars, service type of jobs. And what it's, and what we're seeing, is that, there's certainly underrepresented in American industry. And that is certainly the case also in the cannabis industry. If you look at, some recent statistics just on corporate America, Latinos in management positions account for about 10% of management jobs in corporate America. We unfortunately, we do not have, we're working on the data in the cannabis industry. And if you look at women, specifically Latinas in corporate America, you're looking at only 1% that are in management positions. Really does not nearly meet the representative demographic of Latinos. Latinos account for about 20% of the United States population. And in cannabis, we're seeing a lot of these same barriers. If you look at retail ownership, Latino ownership is in the retail space is severely lacking. I know that, Raul Molina in Mint Cannabis, he's got an MSO. And I'm trying to think of another one off the top of my head that owns a retail location, and I'm having difficulty doing that. And even on the brand side, we are seeing very few brands solely cater to such an important, gigantic demographic of cannabis consumers. So I think there's a lot of opportunity, for Latinos to get into the game. Certainly on the brand side, I think that's kind of, if you're going to look at overall penetration or representation, there are some really good brands out there. Marijuana is one that comes to mind. Dulce is another one that comes to mind. Both those brands are based out here in California. It seems to be obviously, California is kind of, home base for a lot of cannabis, at least where it starts. So it kind of makes sense. And of course, obviously, our Latino population here in California, is sizable. But I think it's one of these areas that we just need to improve upon and see this upward mobility, among Latinos in the space, which we are unfortunately not seeing. And unfortunately, I think this is mirroring, a lot of what has happened in corporate America up until this point. I think there's a lot of reasons for that. Latinos are such a huge demographic in terms of countries represented. We're talking dozens of different countries, numerous languages, sometimes even within these countries. So I know that language, is part of the barrier. But for some reason or another, we are just not seeing the strides that Latinos should be making in the industry and in corporate America in general compared to, other demographic groups.
So you're working on putting together, I don't know if it's a report, but certainly details, anecdotes, details, data related to that as it relates to the cannabis industry for sure. So I'm going to tell people to get in touch with you. If they have other sources of data, other sources of insight, get in touch with Chris. We'll put how to get in touch with him along with the show notes as we go forward. Certainly, as you're in LA, that's sort of the hotbed for that. And kudos to you for looking at that and getting that information together. I want to shift also to something happening in California, which is the K.U.S.H Collective and getting their license revoked in California. Talk about what happened, and then we'll talk about sort of the impact of that on the sector, certainly in California.
Okay, so we had this, lightning rod report from the LA Times in Weed Week some months ago. I believe it was in June that kind of, put even a bigger spotlight on this issue of potential pesticide contamination, and really kind of it's prompted a lot. It's prompted a big response from DCC, which Department of Cannabis Control. They are the head regulator here in California. It is prompted them to issue, I think, at least over a dozen recalls related to pesticides in products. But not only that, it's caused a lot of folks are losing confidence in this regulated market in California. I think that there's been a lot of concerns on lab testing, which we've talked about, with potency, inflation. I mean, these are issues that we've been talking about for years and years and years in the space. But now we're talking about COAs, certificates of analysis, which are supposed to prove what is actually in the product. We're seeing a lot of holes in this system where these products do pass testing. They get clean COAs, and months later, for some reason, they are tested again, and they're positive. They're showing positive in terms of contamination. So K.U.S.H was part of. They've kind of been embroiled in this pesticide scandal for months now. Last month, the DCC actually suspended their license. Essentially, they showed up to their facility in Van Nuys, which is a part of Los Angeles in the Valley, and they basically did not let them in the door, which is a pretty brazen. Yeah, it's pretty brazen. So when they came back again, I believe it was maybe a day or two later, the regulators and investigators found a lot of product that was essentially untraceable, and this is kind of one of these open secrets that we've been talking about in California marketplace a long time is, what products that are actually produced end up in the regulated market, and where the hell do the rest of the products end up? We have a lot of theories there, and I don't want to, throw out any accusations because these are all unproven. But, for all of us that have been in this marketplace for a long time, there are certainly a lot of concerns of, some product ends up going out the back door. On this visit to K.U.S.H, they found, there's no video recordings. These are all against the California rules and regs here. They weren't able to, there's a lot of deficiencies in track and trace. Of course, that's a requirement in almost every single marketplace. So basically, DCC took, rather strong posture and basically yanked their license, revoked their license. A few weeks ago, we were the first ones to get that story. DCC, surprisingly, if you look at all the data, they have been revoking licenses. I believe that they've done maybe 23 or 24 this year. It's still kind of a rare move. But what has happened is, when usually when these recalls happen, they are months and months and months after the fact that these products are already gone. They've already been consumed, and this is a nationwide issue here, where this is not, when they do these recalls in almost every state, they're way late in the game. And it almost is like, why are we making a big light of this recall when essentially there's no products left? They've been consumed. We're talking months and months.
Right.
What's interesting here in this case, the time gap is really, these products are still on the shelves here. A lot of them, and all of them have been embargoed, which basically means you can't sell them. They're supposed to be, taken off the shelves and essentially kind of quarantined. And talking to retailers, this has caused, a lot of strain on their business, because even looking through the portal that DCC has is very cumbersome, and it's not very user friendly. So we're talking about potentially hundreds and hundreds of products. Just being able to get them listed has been a problem for retailers, and then actually removing them off the shelves. And now they have to figure out what has been paid for, what has not been paid for. Are we going to have to reimburse folks who come in to our store? Are we going to be able to get any money from K.U.S.H? And this is like one of the big problems that we have in California, is just invoice payments or lack thereof.
Right.
So it's caused a lot of strife on retailers here, and obviously, they're under numerous challenges already.
Yeah, it's like, and I wonder, um, like, one is the actual licensure and taking that away. That's like one part. Two is this broader issue of now the Cannabis Control Board like actually being more aggressive or more out there, and the impact of that on those particular businesses, the licenses, but also sort of further down the supply chain and at retail, where I know we've talked to retailers that it's just chaotic, may be too strong a word, but it is a very challenging business environment to do it, to get a message from the Cannabis Control Board that these products, which you may or may not have on your shelves, may or may not have sold, are now to be quarantined, pulled off the shelves, which is taking up space. There's money allocated to it. How do you get replacement products? Like all those things are a real
Absolutely.
challenge. And they're happening, of course, in California, which is the hyper competitive market. The legacy industry is super resilient and strong. And then big stories like this happen that send shockwaves throughout. It is another shockwave and a real challenge. Like, I guess, what are you hearing? Like, I guess, I don't know if K.U.S.H is saying anything, but are others nervous that they're going to face similar inspections? Or is this having a chilling effect in other ways on other licensees? Or are there some that are saying, at least they're cracking down now when they weren't before?
Yeah, I think there's a little bit of everything. I think there's this, new push in California to get this Cat 4 kind of designation, which is not official. It is not given by the state, but basically brands and retailers are kind of taking it upon themselves to test beyond the full panel test that DCC requires. Because this is the thing about, testing just in general. There are hundreds and hundreds of potential pesticides out there. We don't even know how harmful some of them are. If you talk to experts, some people say that certain pesticides are not harmful at all to humans. But again, when DCC, I believe they only require about 66 elements that are tested. You're talking about potentially hundreds more that are not. So some brands and some retailers have kind of taken it upon themselves to implement more stringent testing, let's just say.
Mm-hmm.
And what's kind of interesting is I'm already seeing this kind of used as a marketing and branding aspect, especially when we're talking about outdoor grows, legacy growers, folks that have been doing this for decades, decades, and decades, which are, as organic as you can be. There's also a big push to get this. There's a designation called OCAL, and it's essentially organic California certified, and they give it to agriculture products primarily here in the state. But now there's a push for cultivators, cannabis cultivators, to gain this certification. And now we're actually seeing, numerous companies, growers seek this designation again to differentiate themselves from this other lot, who may or may not be doing nefarious things with cultivation. But a lot of this is not, because these are agricultural lands for decades and decades. Some of this is baked into the soil and the atmosphere. So getting clean reads and clean looks at this pesticide problem is extremely difficult because of waterways, wind. I mean, there's so many factors at play here. There, a lot of times facilities have been contaminated before, which leads to new contaminations. So getting the root cause of this is so very difficult. But there's no doubt that regulators are ramping up testing, they're ramping up enforcement, and there's certainly a push in California here to, amongst many brands, more and more brands, it seems like every week, and retailers, to really push the, consumer safety and health, and using that as marketing and branding also.
Yeah, I mean, there's a bit of the sort of regulatory sort of crackdown or licensure, and then there's like the industry itself saying we actually want to adhere to, of course, those rules, but these rules too, to differentiate ourselves from a marketing and environmental perspective, all those things, which I think is a maturation of the industry. It just comes at a very challenging time to actually do all these things. And I don't know, any bright spots coming from California? I don't want to read all the stories that things just
Well,
suck.
we
At
have.
least
I think we've had a lot of the, we've had the exodus. I think we had a lot of that in the last 2 years. Folks, hundreds of licenses gone. I think you're finally going to see, as this year kind of progresses, a steadying of the marketplace. It'll be interesting to see if we're going to see more M&A here in the market. There's a couple of bills that we've talked about before that Newsom did pass that should help retail and consumption spaces, a little bit of a tax break on the law that he basically eliminating double taxation on the local, state, county levels. But again, there is just a lot of overhang here in the California market. But this is what I know. People love California weed.
Right.
We are still looked at as, the mother country for good weed. And that is not changing. I don't think that will ever change. Probably, we have a long runway for that. But of course, we can't export our weed outside of California. But I think that, as the market matures, you're going to see, a much stronger group of companies that remain. Who remains, how they remain, of course, is a big question.
Yeah. Oh, with all of that, it's a lot going on in California. I appreciate you, Chris, for joining us here today on Reporter's Notebook. And thank you for the work that you're doing. Certainly identify the needs, challenges, and opportunities for Latinos in this space as well. Thank you for the deep dive into what's happening in California, as always. And we will connect with you. I don't know, it won't be too long from now, maybe once before the election, when things may have not been upended, but certainly there'll be impacts to the sector as well. So thanks for making time today.
Thanks, Jay. Appreciate you, man. As always, love what you do. Love being on the show.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody. We'll be back Monday, actually, with the CEO of LeafLink. So check in with us on Monday at 10 a.m. Eastern, 7 a.m. Pacific. I know you'll be awake for that, Chris, on Monday morning. So we'll check in with everybody next week. Have a good and safe weekend, everybody. See you later.